The night was quiet at Cape Kennedy, Florida. January 27, 1967. 3 men sat inside the Apollo 1 capsule, a small metal world meant to carry them beyond the sky. Virgil Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee, names that would later be etched into history. But on this night, they were just human beings, breathing, talking, joking, dreaming. Outside, the technicians and engineers worked, unaware that history was about to turn its cold eye inward. The crew ran routine tests, checking every system, every wire, every valve. Everything appeared normal. And yet, in the stillness, danger waited silently. The Apollo program was ambitious, a race not only to the moon, but to prove the might and ingenuity of the United States. Pressure pressed down like the weight of the entire nation on the shoulders of astronauts and engineers alike. Deadlines loomed. Schedules mattered more than comfort. Safety was a factor, but ambition often came first. Inside the capsule, the astronauts were unaware of a subtle but deadly hazard: the pure oxygen environment. It made fire behavior unpredictable. A spark that would normally fade into harmless smoke could become a roaring, unstoppable flame. They laughed, spoke, ran checklists. They could not know that life itself would betray them in seconds. Then, a flash, a spark, a hiss of electricity. The world erupted in flame. The fire spread faster than any human could react. Flames engulfed the capsule almost instantly. Oxygen, the very substance meant to sustain life, accelerated destruction. The crew could do nothing. Escape was impossible. Outside, technicians saw only smoke, heard only alarms. They rushed, frantically trying to save men they could not reach. Every second was agony, every action futile. Inside, 3 astronauts were trapped. The fire was merciless. It consumed metal, wires, and human dreams with equal speed. The smell of burning insulation, the roar of oxygen-fed flames, the intense heat. It is impossible to imagine unless you were there, which none of us were. The public would later see photographs of technicians frozen in horror. NASA reports would discuss electrical anomalies and safety measures, carefully sanitizing the human tragedy. But the real horrormen, burning alive in the capsule, fighting to survive, was hidden behind bureaucracy and scientific language. Families received phone calls that night. Voices were broken. Tears fell quietly. Husbands, wives, children confronted grief so immediate, so intimate, so impossible, it left scars that would never fade. Gus Grissom had flown in space before. He knew risk. He had joked about rockets and failures in past missions. Ed White had walked in space. Roger Chaffee had yet to experience orbit. Each carried courage, training, and hope, human traits that were powerless against the fire that consumed them. The nation would mourn publicly, flags at half-staff, speeches honoring bravery. But the real human cost, the intimacy of fear, trust, and ultimate loss, would remain largely invisible. The crew were heroes, yes, but also humans betrayed by the very technology they trusted. Inside NASA, engineers went over every detail. Reports, memos, and warnings were examined. Some had raised concerns about flammable materials in the cabin, hyperpressure, oxygen, electrical wiring. Some were ignored, delayed, or dismissed in the rush to achieve national goals. The truth was inconvenient. Ambition and human error had collided with deadly consequences. Yet the story did not die in the capsule. It lingered in memories. The screams that were never heard on live TV. The family members who would never hug again. The quiet grief of colleagues who knew they could have prevented it had they listened. This tragedy forced a reckoning in the Apollo program. Every procedure, every material, every oxygen system was scrutinized. Designs were changed. Safety became paramount, but at the cost of 3 brave lives who had already paid the ultimate price. The Apollo 1 fire reminds us that progress is fragile, that ambition carries risk, that technology can be a savior or a destroyer, and that the stories of those who are lost are not always told in full, hidden behind reports, statistics, and official language. The men of Apollo 1 are remembered today as heroes, but their suffering, their fear, their last moments, these remain silent, whispered only in the hearts of those who truly saw the capsule, the fire. The night hit is a memory of what happens when human courage meets the unforgiving laws of physics, and when bureaucracy blinds us to danger. The lesson is both timeless and chilling. Human lives are fragile, even when protected by technology. Risk is inherent in ambition. The human cost of progress is not always measured in headlines or medals, but in grief, absence, and silence. And above all, the Apollo 1 fire teaches this. History may record the program, the mission, the launch plans, but the human stories behind the science are often erased, leaving only memory and unanswered questions. The morning after the fire, silence dominated Cape Kennedy. Not the calm of relief, but the heavy, oppressive quiet of shock. The capsule was gone, consumed by flames. The astronauts were gone. Their dreams turned to ash. Families, friends, and colleagues faced an unbearable truth. 3 men they loved were dead, not on some distant battlefield or in a visible disaster, but trapped inside a small metal capsule, consumed in seconds by fire they could neither see nor fight. The nation mourned in broad strokes, memorials, moments of silence, newspaper headlines honoring courage, but the intimate human grief, the private anguish of parents, wives, siblings, and friends remained largely invisible. It could not be quantified or dramatized. It simply existed, quietly, in homes and hearts across the country. Investigations followed. The Apollo program halted. Every wire, every panel, every procedure scrutinized. Engineers worked tirelessly to prevent another catastrophe. Safety regulations were rewritten. Materials were replaced. Pure oxygen environments were reconsidered. The program had to survive, but survival came at a price. The public learned of the technical reasons behind the disaster. O-rings, wiring, flammable materials, diagrams and charts replaced human faces. Audiences saw numbers, but not the fear, the hope, or the laughter extinguished in the fire. And yet, those who had been there, the technicians, the engineers, the families, remembered every detail. Not in charts or numbers, but in sensation. The heat that could not be felt directly. The screams that were never heard on television. The sudden absence in offices and classrooms. Krista McAuliffe's students had been inspired by teachers, astronauts, and heroes. The Apollo 1 crew had a similar effect on the nation, proof that ordinary humans could touch the extraordinary. When tragedy struck, that inspiration became haunting memory. Children learning about space in schools afterward were taught the mission, the program, the goals. They were not taught the silence, the fear, the human faces behind the science. And yet, those who lived through it carried the stories forever, whispered between colleagues, in family living rooms, and in the quiet spaces of museums and archives. The Apollo 1 fire also reshaped the way America approached space. NASA could not ignore the human cost. Every subsequent mission carried lessons painfully learned from January 27, 1967. Safety became a priority. Ambition, while still necessary, was tempered by caution. The fire remained an unspoken companion to every launch, a silent witness etched into the memory of every astronaut who followed. Progress demanded risk, but the risk had revealed a fundamental truth. Technology cannot protect the human spirit from oversight, miscalculation, or tragedy. Even decades later, the names Grissom, White, and Chaffee are remembered in history books, documentaries, and memorials. Their bravery is celebrated, but what is often omitted: the terror, the last moments, the unrecorded human emotions, equally important. For those who pay attention, the Apollo 1 fire teaches something timeless. Ambition and courage alone are never enough. Human life is fragile. Systems can fail. Bureaucracy can blind. And when it does, the consequences are swift and irrevocable. The capsule, now gone, rests only in memory and cautionary tales. The lessons are embedded in every wire, every check, every mission that followed. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of history, the human stories endures, unseen but unforgettable.